The scanner let out a cold beep. Not loud, not sharp, just enough for the air around Gate C-27 at Atlanta International Airport to drop, like someone had just muted the soundtrack of a film. Lennox Duvall stood still. He was 45, black, his face calm, carrying the kind of silence that comes from having long understood the systems designed to erase him. The gate agent, a blonde girl with a headset and a voice shaped by customer service training, looked up, then down again at the scanner. "I'm sorry, sir. Your QR code isn't verifying. It's probably a system error, but I'll need you to step aside so we can update the passenger list." Her voice was gentle, like asking someone to switch seats, but wrapped inside it was a deep denial. "Your name isn't on here. Your presence is a mistake." Behind Lennox, a white man in a polo shirt muttered to his friend, "Some people always slow things down, you know." The woman beside him nodded, pulling her handbag closer, like a reflex. Lennox said nothing. His phone screen was still glowing. Seat 1C. Confirmed. First class. But he understood. In systems programmed to discard what doesn't fit, confirmation is just a fragile wrapper. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been denied not by words, but by a glance, by silence, or a system error? If you've ever felt that, like this video, subscribe to Racist Exposed and comment the name of your city, because this story doesn't just belong to Lennox. It belongs to everyone who's ever been seen as not qualified to exist in a space simply because of the color of their skin. Justice doesn't need to scream to exist. It just needs to be seen, to be remembered, and this time no one can erase it. The overhead lights flickered, a pale gray-white glow, cold and lifeless like the eyes people reserve for those who don't fit the scene. Lennox Duvall stood still at Gate C-27 Atlanta International Airport, dressed in a black linen suit buttoned up to the collar. The bamboo fabric caught just enough light to avoid flashiness, but still carried the quiet authority of someone who clearly didn't belong to the ordinary. But here, appearances had no weight. Here, what mattered was the beep. And when the scanner emitted a red beep, everything around him seemed to sag like the wind had just been blocked at the cockpit door. Boarding announcements continued in the distance, but at this gate where Lennox stood, time had gone suspended. "I'm sorry, sir," said the light brown-haired gate agent. Her voice was neither cold nor warm, like she had said this exact sentence hundreds of times this month, to men like Lennox, at gates just like this one. "Your QR code didn't register. It might be a system error. Please step aside so we can reprocess the flight manifest." Lennox didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He simply lifted his phone slowly. The screen displayed Obsidian Grid Platinum, Seat 1C, confirmed. But the woman didn't look at his screen. She stared at her tablet where the system said, "No name found." In her mind, there was no image of Lennox, only the absence of a valid code. And in an industry run by protocol over people, that absence meant he didn't exist. Footsteps behind him. A white man approached, gave Lennox a sideways glance as if he were a delivery guy standing at the wrong gate. "System error again," the man muttered with a dry chuckle. "These are usually discount fares or unfinished bookings. Happens a lot." He wasn't speaking to Lennox, but the words pierced the air between them like invisible violence. From the waiting seats off to the right, a young black boy, maybe 8 or 9, leaned forward, eyes lit up with recognition, like he'd just seen something familiar that he rarely spotted in an airport. "Mom," he whispered, eyes locked on Lennox. "Mom? Isn't that the guy from the commercial? The one who built the satellites?" His mother, wearing an olive cardigan, distracted with documents, glanced up. Her eyes met Lennox's for a brief moment. Recognition. Then avoidance. Not because she wasn't proud, but because she had learned to make herself small, to stay unnoticed. She gently pulled her son down by the shoulder. "Shh," she murmured. "That's not for here. Not here. Not where people like Lennox are quietly asked to step aside. Not where first-class tickets become suspicious because the hand holding them has the wrong shade." Lennox stood still, statuesque. He heard it all, but he didn't react. because he knew any reaction would be noted and used as justification. Another staff member approached, checked the system, looked him over top to bottom, then turned away as if inspecting a wine bottle without a barcode. The scanner didn't beep this time. No red, no green, just silence. And in that silence, Lennox Duvall understood he'd just been erased from the equation. But he also knew any equation can be rewritten if you're the one who designed the language it's written in. A white man in a management uniform approached. On his collar, the insignia of Horizon Sky, the third largest airline in America. He glanced at Lennox's phone, then at the check-in agent's tablet. A few taps, a few swipes, then a nod. Cold. "Mr. Duvall," he said, mispronouncing it slightly. "Your ticket may have been suspended during a system sync. Sometimes that happens when bookings go through third parties." "No," Lennox replied low, firm. "I booked directly through the app, with a corporate card issued by my own company to your airline." The air shifted again. The manager looked at him a second time. This time, really looked. Why would someone like him be removed from the list? There was no mistake, no glitch, only a system designed not to recognize him and then blame the error on tech. "We're checking again," said the man, same cold tone. Lennox tilted his head slightly. No bow, no retreat. Across the terminal, the same young boy looked up again, and this time, his eyes memorized the moment. Not because Lennox was famous, but because something was happening to a man who looked like his father, and he couldn't do anything about it. Then, the manager's tablet pinged. His eyes twitched. Lennox Duvall's name still didn't appear. But now an orange alert had surfaced. Passenger listed as inactive, pending authorization override. Only those with core system access could override that. Lennox read the line, then looked the man straight in the eye. He didn't say a word. He didn't move a muscle. But anyone standing nearby felt the storm forming quietly behind those eyes. When Lennox stepped into the first-class cabin, no eyes confronted him, no voices addressed him. They didn't need to. Seat 1C was empty. Napkin folded square. Armrest control panel polished. Everything in place. As if awaiting someone else. Someone not like him. He sat down. Movements precise and calm. Like a man who had done this 1,000 times. His left hand gently pressed the reading light. Nothing. He tried the seat recline. The screen stayed black. No error. No message. Just silence. From the flight deck behind, a male voice murmured through the internal system. Not loud enough for passengers to hear, but loud enough for the right ears. "Run protocol graylisting. Let him think it's just a system glitch." No one referred to Lennox by name. They didn't have to. The system already tagged him as a temporary inconvenience. Seat unmoving, light unlit. And the man in that seat, a black executive with a tech legacy spanning 3 decades, was once again dismissed. No physical contact necessary. He remained upright, and that, to those who wished he wasn't there, was the greatest threat of all. An electronic chime. Seat 1D beside Lennox lit up. A young white woman stepped in wearing cream-colored loungewear and fur slippers. Phone held high, camera facing her. "First class, baby," she announced, voice loud. "Cabin, her personal studio." Everything turned on at once. Reading lights. Charging port. Welcome touchscreen. A flight attendant appeared with a chilled glass of white wine. She beamed, raising her ticket to the camera. "Free upgrade for the win." Each word delivered like a headline. The digital world responded instantly. Comments. Hearts. Emojis flooding her screen. She existed. Lennox, sitting right next to her, did not. No camera turned his way. No flight attendant asked if he needed anything. The system, all of it, silently conspired to render him invisible. He stared ahead. No tilt of the head, no bowing. The silence around him was not weakness. It was learned resistance. He had long grown used to this type of erasure, the kind that required no volume, no stated reason, just quiet programming designed to look away. The white napkin folded square on the table remained untouched. Lennox unbuttoned his collar not to relax, but to prepare. From his inside pocket, he drew a fountain pen, black ink, smooth flow, no smudges. He wrote across the napkin's edge a single, steady line, no shake in his hand. Silence is not weakness, it is bandwidth. No one saw the words, no one needed to. Lennox didn't write them to be read. He wrote them to record this moment a data packet, waiting for its time to shine. A young male attendant entered the cabin, brown-skinned, eyes widened when he saw Lennox. He didn't speak, but his gaze faltered. His lips parted, then closed. He nodded, barely. No one noticed, but Lennox did. For the first time, someone in the cabin looked at him not with doubt, not with dismissal, but with recognition. Lennox didn't respond. He returned the pen to his pocket, sat still. The seat didn't recline, the light didn't shine, but in that moment, he knew a connection had just begun. Not with the airline, not with the seat, but with those quietly waiting for someone to stand tall, even in the dark. Lennox remained upright in seat 1C, posture steady like a pillar, back unsupportive, eyes seeking no one. His seat still didn't recline. The light still didn't shine. The screen remained black. No one came to check on him. No one explained why. Only he understood what was happening, because he was the one who wrote the software they were using. 3 years ago, Obsidian Grid, the company Lennox founded, had licensed its passenger verification system to Horizon Sky. All seat assignments, ticket scans, access permissions, every function was built on infrastructure he had personally designed. And this afternoon, they were using that very infrastructure to exclude him from the flight. Lennox rotated his wrist slowly. The black watch on his left hand bore no logo. It was a custom device, dual encrypted, no signal output, no data retention. Only one function connect back to the root architecture he created. He tapped 3 words onto the watch face. Bypass latency limit. Each word appeared within 2 seconds. No one around him noticed, but the system did. In under 4 seconds, the cabin gave a subtle tremor. No screaming, no alerts. But everyone could sense something shifted. One passenger's seat snapped abruptly into upright position. Another's screen went black. A flight attendant tapped the meal selection console, no response. Reading lights dimmed. Section by section. The whole aircraft cabin entered a state of waiting. Not failure, not crash, just a quiet, deliberate logout. 7 miles away, inside the Obsidian Grid headquarters in Atlanta, a security engineer on night shift raised an eyebrow. A new message had just appeared in the core system. System override initiated. Source gate C27. Authenticated device Lennox Duval. Priority level Tier 1. Architect access. The engineer froze. Lennox Duval. That name hadn't auto-logged into any server in years. He double-checked the authentication genuine, not a spoof, not an error. The creator of the system was now intervening live from a flight. On board, the flight attendants began to worry. No passenger had pressed a call button, but none of the seats were responding. Cabin screens dimmed to black. The entertainment system had gone dark. A single message appeared on the main cabin screen near the cockpit. System under architect control, awaiting identity verification from board of directors. No airline logo, no flight attendant voice, just silence thick and pressing. And in the center of it all, Lennox Duval remained seated as if everything was proceeding exactly as intended. The lead flight attendant turned around, whispering to her colleague, "We've lost control of the cabin systems." The assistant nodded, still holding the backup control pad, also unresponsive. They had no idea what was happening. No error messages, no warnings. Just no response. They started to speculate. Maybe a firmware issue, maybe a cyber attack. What they didn't expect was that the man sitting right in front of them was the one in control. A passenger in the middle rows looked up. "Why is my seat locked up? My movie just froze. Can someone check this?" From seat 3D, a young man pulled out his phone and began recording the cabin. Nothing dramatic was happening, and yet, something felt off. People didn't know the cause, but they began to sense. The black man in seat 1C wasn't invisible. He was the epicenter. And a few of them fell silent. Not out of fear, but because they suddenly realized. They were inside a system that he understood better than anyone else. On the 12th floor of Horizon Sky headquarters, less than a 20-minute drive from the airport, a new alert appeared on the Internal Legal Operations Board. Primary IP contributor flagging digital bias via embedded metrics. Urgent request from system architect, verify race-based data discrepancies at the board level. An executive gasped, Lennox Duval. But they're using his system. Another replied, nearly breathless. No. He didn't just license it. He wrote it. Immediately, the legal team began reviewing the licensing contract between Horizon Sky and Obsidian Grid. Clause 14 popped up highlighted in yellow. If the system is used for the purpose of unfair exclusion, the original architect reserves the right to suspend all passenger interface operations for audit. That clause had never been triggered. Until now. An emergency meeting was convened. 12 minutes later, the FAA issued an official email to Horizon Sky's executive board, requiring a full audit of passenger lists flagged for errors, specifically cases where black passengers had been downgraded or removed from flights. All eyes turned toward the aircraft now preparing for takeoff. The one where a man wasn't yelling, wasn't arguing, but had still managed to slow down the airline's entire system with a single command. 6 minutes after the override, 3 major news outlets dropped simultaneous headlines. Black CEO flagged mid-flight systems designed to profile. The comments exploded like a tidal wave. Under each post, hundreds of thousands of views. Subheadline: Airline Horizon Sky accused of using technical glitches to exclude black passengers. On Twitter and other platforms, 3 hashtags began trending. Glitched while black. He wrote the code. Boarding blocked bias. A TikTok video just 19 seconds showed Lennox sitting calmly, reading light off, screen black, untouched. Right beside him, other passengers were being served. The clip hit 800,000 views in 9 minutes. Back in the cabin, the flight crew began to realize they were being watched. Not just by cameras, but by a rising silence on social media, roaring just beyond the fuselage. Some passengers began to squirm. The cabin felt heavier not from malfunction, but from the undeniable presence of a story far bigger than a boarding pass. And at the center of that story was a man the system had failed to recognize. Now, he was forcing the system to recognize itself. Seat 1D, right next to Lennox, belonged to Roger Langford, a white investor in his 50s. Premium polo, glasses hanging from his collar. The overconfident tone of someone used to controlling rooms. He hadn't said a word until now. But as whispers spread, phones appeared. Headlines buzzed through the air like static. Roger couldn't resist. He leaned slightly toward Lennox, speaking low but loud enough for others to hear. You could move to economy. Avoid all this drama. Honestly, no one likes looking like the guy causing trouble. Lennox turned his head. 1 second of eye contact. Not long, but enough to make Roger shift slightly back. He spoke slowly, calm, no sarcasm, no anger. If I move down, there'll be no trouble, but there won't be a lesson either. Roger fell silent. No one answered. No one defended. Because what Lennox said didn't need debate. It was a truth too obvious to deny. If the excluded always step aside, the system never has to correct itself. On the top floor of Obsidian Grid headquarters, an emergency meeting had just begun. No cameras, no press. Just 7 people, the founding board of one of America's largest digital infrastructure firms, all staring at the same control display. On screen was a live visual feed from the cabin of Flight HS-221. No sound, just images. Seat 1C. Lennox Duval, sitting still, silent. Next to him, Roger Langford, visibly tense. Online, the news was escalating by the hour. Hashtags continued to spread, and the latest headline from a major financial outlet read, Lead shareholder of Obsidian Grid denied access, mid-flight on the very system he designed. On the left side of the screen, a new window appeared. Golden Clause Emergency Reputation Protocol activated. It was a rarely discussed clause. It granted the Obsidian board authority to reassign top-level liaisons for any partner organization that caused reputational damage at a systemic level. No courtroom needed, no public argument, just a secure digital vote protected under federal authentication laws. One board member glanced at his watch. 7 minutes to vote, he said. Silence filled the room. Only the sound of mice clicking. One by one. The votes appeared. Exactly 7 minutes later, the display read, Transition proposal confirmed. Acting Chairman Lennox Duval approved 6-7 votes. No one said a word, because they all understood power had just shifted. No press release, no statement, just the right timing and the right person. On board the plane, the seats were still unresponsive, so if the crew hadn't been told what to do. Passengers began to whisper, something big is happening. Then a soft tone sounded. The first-class cabin display lit up. Black background. Red text. Chairman Transition Duval, Lennox, confirmed. No music, no airline logo. Just a simple message enough to hush the entire cabin. A flight attendant carrying a tray paused in the aisle. Her hand trembled slightly. She looked at the screen, then at seat 1C. A young technician, black, standing near the mid-cabin door, glanced at the display, then at Lennox. In that brief moment, his lips curled, not a full smile, just a slight nod. He whispered, barely audible. They just let the man who wrote the rules rewrite the game. Lennox didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because now, the silence was speaking loud enough. Passengers began murmuring. A woman asked, "Who is he?" The man beside her answered, "They say he built the software the airline runs on." Nearby, a boy leaned toward his mother and whispered, "I thought they denied him." She nodded gently and whispered back, "They did, but they didn't defeat him." A few rows back, a man pulled out his phone and opened a market tracking app. Horizon Sky stock was dipping slightly. Obsidian Grid stock was rising. A system had tried to erase someone from the cabin, the database, and view. But what they didn't anticipate was, he didn't need permission to hold power. Because he didn't ask for entry. He simply found the right access point and let the system reveal its own fault lines. On the control panel above the cabin aisle, the message remained. Chairman Transition Duval, Lennox, confirmed. No more words were needed, because for those who've been erased before, being visible clearly, undeniably is the highest form of recognition. The cabin remained silent. The red text, Chairman Transition Duval, Lennox, confirmed, still lingered on the screen. No new instructions had been issued to the flight crew. The passengers weren't quiet out of confusion. They were quiet because they knew exactly what was shifting. Lennox retrieved a tablet from his inner jacket pocket. No airline logo, no corporate branding. Just a black screen with one line in white. Obsidian Grid, internal mode. He opened the Audit panel, a system designed to track operational data for flights using the platform he built. Under the header behavioral flags, 18 months, he tapped a filter by passenger group. A list appeared, no names, just flight numbers, departure times, and reasons for seat reassignments. A simple warning displayed. 73 cases of automatic seat reassignment involving black passengers in the past 18 months. Lennox didn't react. No surprise. No outrage. Just a quiet nod, a confirmation of what he had long suspected. Only now, it was in numbers. At the front of the cabin, Tasha, the lead flight attendant, stood still. She had been the one to ask Lennox to step aside. She had spoken softly but precisely. QR code not verifying. Might need to rebook your seat. Now, she looked towards seat 1C as if to apologize, but couldn't find the words. Lennox hadn't summoned her, hadn't demanded anything. He simply tapped another command on his tablet. A new list loaded manual seat reassignments recorded by staff. Tasha's name appeared, 19 instances. A young black male flight attendant approached Lennox. "Do you want us to take her off this flight?" His voice was low, quiet. There was anger in it, but restrained. Lennox met his gaze, then shook his head. "No, keep her. Let her go through every report. Let her meet every passenger she pushed aside. Learn one by one. Education corrects, not erasure." The attendant nodded and stepped away silently. No one said another word, but everyone heard that. And slowly, they began to understand. He didn't come for revenge. He came to rewrite the operating system. From the right side of the cabin, a quiet voice rose. It was the young black boy from earlier. He looked toward Lennox, his eyes brighter now than when he first entered gate C-27. He whispered just loud enough for his mother to hear. "Is he the boss, Mom?" She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes settled on Lennox, still sitting upright, not demanding attention, yet impossible to ignore. She leaned down, smiled gently. "He's always been the boss. It's just that now, the whole plane knows it." The boy nodded, said nothing more, but in his eyes that quiet light was something no report card could ever measure. A belief that he too could be seen that way, one day. Lennox closed the tablet. No backup needed. The data had already been sent. The audit results would reach the boardroom within 24 hours. He didn't need to stand, didn't need to make a speech. He only needed the truth to be seen clearly, unfiltered, undeniable. And this time, the system would be held accountable because the man it once erased now ran it. The cabin remained silent for nearly 15 minutes. No one raised their voice. No one dared to ask for food service, or when the flight would take off. Every pair of eyes stayed fixed on the screen at the front of the cabin. Still the same familiar message, white text on a red background, confirming that Lennox Duval had been appointed interim executive chairman. Then suddenly the screen shifted. From black, it faded into a silvery gray. A new logo appeared, clean, unembellished, an open circle. And at the center, a simple, bold name. Relay Air, where the message lands. No music, no corporate fanfare. Some passengers exchanged glances. A few frowned. A white woman murmured, "Relay Air. What airline is that?" A man next to her replied quietly, "The one we just witnessed being born." The old name Horizon Sky disappeared from every screen, gone from the in-flight entertainment. Even connected headsets re-identified the new brand. In mere seconds, the entire aircraft had been renamed in mid-air. A minute later, the cabin intercom came alive. "Dear passengers, thank you for flying with us. Relay Air would like to share our updated safety procedures." The first voice was male, white, Midwest accent. The second, female, Asian American, soft and clear. The third, male, black, Southern, deep, warm, grounded. They read in turns. None overpowered the others. Each shared a part, as if this new airline was being built out of many voices, many stories. An older black man seated mid-cabin closed his eyes and nodded. Not because the message was groundbreaking, but because, for the first time in years, he heard a voice like his own on the intercom. Not as background music, not as a service provider, but as a voice of instruction, a voice that held authority. A nearby passenger whispered, "They even changed how they speak." The older man responded, "No, they just finally started speaking the language that should have been there all along." As the cabin steadied, some passengers' phones lit up, new email notifications. Subject lines were simple. "Relay Air wants to hear from you. Your journey deserves to be acknowledged. Have you ever felt invisible on a flight? We want to know why." Every black passenger in economy, business class, or aisle seats received the message. Not a generic survey, not a request for a star rating. Just an invitation to describe what it felt like to be seen, or not seen. An open form, no word limits, no forced tone. No one was required to fill it out, but each person who opened it went quiet for a few moments. A young black woman near the rear of the plane blinked back tears as she read. No one asked what was wrong, but an older man nearby gently touched her shoulder. "Not everyone has the courage to start again," he said. "But when someone does, those who've been forgotten finally get invited in. And that is Relay Air. Not the biggest airline, not yet the best, but the first one to ever ask black passengers a question like this. Have you ever felt ignored? If so, this time, we want to hear you." The cabin lights dimmed into landing mode. Overhead panels softened. Passengers began preparing to fasten their seatbelts. The pilot's voice came through. "We'll be landing in 12 minutes. Everything seemed settled. But in seat 1C, Lennox Duval slowly stood up. He didn't glance around. He didn't ask for permission. He simply stepped into the aisle, into the line of sight of every passenger on board. No microphone, no security, no spotlight. Just him, and a cabin that was watching. Lennox paused in the center of the first-class section. His voice was low, not loud, but clear enough that no one had to lean in. "This afternoon, I was removed from the system without anyone touching me. I was flagged without anyone saying my name. That's how bias works now, polite, digital, and invisible." He paused again. The sentence hovered in the air like a declaration that needed no approval. "But at some point," he continued, "someone has to rewrite the protocol." Then he took one step back, facing the rest of the cabin now. "I didn't just reclaim a seat. I reclaimed the standard. I'm not the main story. I'm just where it begins." No one clapped, no cheers, and no one said, "Thank you." Not because they didn't care, but because they were still unwrapping what they'd just witnessed. Lennox returned to seat 1C. No one blocked his way. No one bowed or applauded. And yet everyone on board understood something had shifted. As the plane's wheels touched down with a soft bounce and a smooth glide, the familiar sound of landing felt different this time. Like a full stop at the end of a story, unlike any other flight. The crew didn't play music. They made no remarks beyond standard landing instructions. A woman in mid-cabin pulled out her phone. She opened a tweet, then deleted it. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she was still thinking it through. A man closed his laptop, never opening his inbox. The person beside him whispered. He only said a few lines, but it felt like he spoke for a lot of people. The air on board wasn't lighter. It was simply clearer, as if the cabin had long been blurred by procedures and data, and someone had just reset the standard for what it meant to be seen. The plane docked at the jet bridge. Passengers began rising, collecting their carry-ons, forming a line. No pushing, no chatter. Only silence, not from fatigue or fear, but because their minds were still catching up to what had just happened. The black technician, the one who nodded to Lennox at the beginning, stepped toward the exit. He glanced back at seat 1C. Lennox was already on his feet, carrying a slim gray pouch. Not a suitcase, not a briefcase, just a case for a tablet and a notebook. Before exiting, he stopped at the exact spot where he had once been told to step aside. He looked toward the exit, then turned to face the cabin one last time. No wave, just a single nod, as if to say, "I didn't return to be welcomed. I came so no one else would have to step backward." And then he walked out. And that flight, the one that seemed so ordinary, had carried not just a man once flagged as a system error, but the very person who rewrote how that system would run. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.